Good morning, folks, and welcome to Revenue Academy from America's Newspapers, day 2. So thank you for joining us. I hope that those of you that were on yesterday, I know some people are coming in and out over the 2-day period, but I hope those of you that were on yesterday had a good day, got some value out of the programming. I've certainly received lots of emails overnight that the sessions were great. People loved them. So that's good. That's what we're here for. And we got more of that coming today. We've got an excellent lineup today with Jim Brown and Liz Kreider-Huff from 2nd Street, followed by a couple folks from the Dallas Morning News. We're going to circle back again on branded content and sponsored content. So we got another big day, and then we've got our revenue idea exchange where we'll be doing on Zoom. So we'll actually log off, go to webinar later this afternoon and jump into our idea exchange. So we have another full day. Housekeeping items. If you are new today and you weren't here yesterday, here's some housekeeping items. You will be muted on the call, of course. Just keeps the environment quiet, free from distractions. Mute your telephones. I always have to remind myself to mute mine so it doesn't go off during the conference. Secondly, most frequent question I get asked is, are we going to get these PowerPoints? Yes, you are going to get the PowerPoints. With regards to this presentation this morning from Jim Brown, you will get his PowerPoint. You will actually get a slightly abbreviated PowerPoint, but it will be most of the context and everything, the content will be there. You'll also get recordings of all the sessions that we have. So in case you missed it or there was something that you really want to share with one of your coworkers, you'll be able to do that. The recordings probably won't be available till tomorrow, and we're posting the handouts and any other collateral material as quickly as we can up on the website, and that's where you'll be able to get all that information. And then I will send out an email to everyone with all that information. So let's get started. We are very fortunate to have Jim Brown with us today. Jim is president of Borrell Associates. We love all the folks at Borrell, Gordon Borrell, Corey Elliott, Jim Brown. They are providers of crucial information to the industry. They're always on top of research, and so we feel fortunate to have them with us to kick off day 2 of the Revenue Academy today. So I am going to turn the program over to Jim Brown so we can get started because he's got a very full presentation for us today. Jim?
Thank you so much, Patty. Very much appreciate it. Yeah, I love all the folks at Borrell Associates too. All of them. I won't say which one. But thank you so much for having us. Delighted to share some information with you today. I have my webcam on, but I'm going to cut it off just because it just interferes a little bit with the throughput here. Those of you who have seen me in person know I'm not all that much to look at anyway. So let me just go ahead and remove this and jump in here. Very excited to spend time with you this morning. I've got a lot of information, a lot of insights that I think you'll find valuable. Here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at what advertisers are spending, whether they plan to spend more or less, or do they plan to spend the same in 2021. We'll look at their budgets, and for those who are planning to increase, and certainly some are, how much are they planning to increase that? We'll look at what's getting increased, what's getting decreased, what do they see as becoming more effective, particularly in the backdrop of lockdowns with COVID, and what's become less effective in their mind. We'll look at what marketing formats and media are getting the biggest gains. And I'm also going to show you why I think you'll have a lot more success talking to your customers and prospects about social media and online video right now. I'm going to delve into some information on franchise owners because I think franchises present an opportunity for you. And it's also a competitive landscape sort of situation where you can look at what franchises versus independents are doing out there. And throughout my presentation, I'm going to make some recommendations to you on your sales approach, something that you as managers, as leaders, as sellers should be thinking about in terms of how you're approaching your customers. The bulk of the information that you're going to see today comes from Borrell's local advertiser survey. I know many of you are on the call are familiar with this and have participated in the past, we typically do this in the spring. However, with everything going on last year, we changed the survey around a bit. We did it much later in the fall so that we could get better insights as to what was going on. So what you're going to see is information from last year's survey. It was conducted at the very end of August through the end of October. There were over 2,200 local advertisers who participated in this. Actually, there's over 5,000 who take the survey. The results you're going to see are from the 2,200 plus advertisers who answered an entire 40 plus question survey. It's a big survey. It takes almost a half hour to fill it out. I tell you that because what I want you to understand about the insights you're getting is they're coming from advertisers, all right? Not just local businesses, but businesses who spend money on advertising and who are highly engaged. I mean, who would take that much time to fill out a survey? The really only enticement we give them is the opportunity to see the results from that survey if they fill out the whole thing. So we think that's one of the reasons why so many of them spend as much time as they do with it. 81% of these businesses have fewer than 100 employees. So we're talking about local businesses, small businesses, the folks you can go in and talk to, and you can certainly influence. There's a wide range of businesses that are covered in our survey. A lot of them are retail, service-oriented, education, healthcare. Most of them are B2C-oriented businesses. 51% of those who took the survey, and that's over 1,000 businesses, advertised in newspapers in 2019, and then 43% of them, just under 1,000, advertised in 2020. The second area of information you're going to get comes from Borrell's local SMB panel. Now, this is sort of an offshoot of the advertiser survey. We have a few hundred businesses who, on an ongoing basis, answer just a few questions that we throw at them every month. And one of the things we have is Borrell's business barometer. We ask them what they think the economic climate is for local businesses, whether that's getting better or worse. So there's a lot of insights we get from that as well, and you'll see more of that information as I go through. But here's the overall storyline for you. What we see is local ad buyers are getting smarter. They're getting a lot more savvy. And I'll show you some indications of that in a little bit. But on the whole, what we see happening is there's a lot of self-service platforms out there with all the digital offerings that are out there. They're educating themselves on how to use that. And that's really important for you as your sellers are out speaking to them, that they understand that they're a bit more savvy than they used to be. They seem to be reducing the number of media partnerships. And in some cases, what we see happening in 2021 is an entire elimination of some media choices. So if they've been using, say, newspaper, radio, and direct mail, one of those is going to get eliminated completely. So you want to make sure it's not you for sure. They seem to be focused a lot more on being found and interacting. Again, with the backdrop of COVID right now, it's very important for them to be found, to be able to interact with customers and prospects who are not able to come in their doors today the way they used to. They seem to be really embracing video marketing. I'm going to talk a lot about that because I think that presents a huge opportunity for you as well. And they're finding that social media costs are really adding up. It used to be the cheap alternative, not so much, particularly when you look at the cost of social media, the internal cost that many of those businesses are now becoming a bit more aware of. They are preparing to spend more in 2021, but they're really undecided about where they're going to be spending that money. Now, how much are they going to increase? Well, this is good news, folks. They're planned to increase on average 14% over last year. So, understand last year was a horrible year. We know that. And I'm not sure if 14% is going to get us back to 2019 levels. But to give you some perspective, when we ask this question, typically year after year after year, the answer is, well, we're going to increase it 1, 2, maybe 3% in a good year. So a 14% increase is quite a good indicator. Of course, that's not being applied evenly across all media, but their overall marketing budget is going to increase. I told you a lot of them are undecided. And I think this might be both an opportunity and something, somewhat of a threat. Their budgets are not completely locked in. In fact, when you look at whether they plan to buy newspapers, certainly a lot of them, 43% have said no, they don't plan to advertise in the newspaper in 2021, but 22% of them said they don't know. They've not yet decided. So that 35% is a decrease from last year and certainly a decrease from the year before. But with that 22% of undecideds, there's still an opportunity to influence them. But it's not just newspaper buyers. Those who plan to buy radio, look at this, 24% have yet to decide whether they're going to buy or not. Look at direct mail, 21%. We even looked at broadcast TV, 22% yet to have decided. Cable TV, 21%, and even outdoor advertising, 23%. So what does this mean? It means there's still an opportunity to influence these businesses and get them thinking about why they should indeed spend with you and why what you have to offer should be an important part of their marketing mix. So to tell you a little bit more about whether they're buying more or buying less and what they plan to do, I thought I'd turn to Corey Elliott. Corey is our Executive Vice President of Local Market Intelligence. Those of you know him, he's a smart guy, he's kind of a funny guy. And what I want to do is play a little video of Corey talking about whether they plan to spend more or less. Now, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for a moment. This is going to be a little bit awkward because I've got to actually flip over to a browser to do this. You're going to see a little video commercial from one of my sponsors. It is not a endorsement by any means, although this company is one you might want to pay attention to because they do provide some video. So just pardon me for a minute. It's going to be a little awkward as I switch over, and then I'll come back on after the video.
Corey's Local Marketing Minute, making research both enlightening and entertaining. Today's Marketing Minute is brought to you by Video Bolt, helping media companies generate new, non-traditional revenue with a scalable video content creation platform. For more information, visit videobolt.com.
Hi, welcome back to the Local Marketing Minute. Today we're going to talk about more, less, or the same. This is in reference to what local advertisers say they're going to spend. This information comes from our S&B panel. If you don't know what that is, you should have been paying attention to the last video. You really need to work on your attention skills. Focus. Our S&B panel has a few hundred advertisers on it. We get to ask them questions every month. At the beginning of the year, we asked them, hey, in 2021, are you going to spend more, less, or the same on advertising? Want to know what they said? That was kind of creepy, wasn't it? Sorry about that. All right. The specific question was, how do you expect your overall 2021 advertising marketing spending to compare to 2020? Here's what they said. Let's start in the middle. 36% said they're going to spend about the same. 25% said less. 30% said more. We have to appreciate the fact that in 2020, a lot of people pulled back altogether. This number is great, but remember the base it's starting off of, which makes me a little concerned about this number. 1 out of 4 saying you're going to spend less. How much less? Ooh, let's get a different color. On average, 43% less. But on this side, plus 35%. Wait a minute, 25% are spending 43% less. It's like, that's my flipping calculator. That's right. That's the 9%. What I was thinking is if they all spent the same amount of money, 25% went down, 30% would go up, what would the result be? It's damn near the same as it was in 2020 because you got 9% who don't know what they're doing. So put them into the 36% bucket. 45% are going to spend the same, 25% less, 30% more. It comes out to just a little bit more than 2020. Thank you. That's the quality education you get on these things. So you got 30% spending more. That's good. Only 25% coming back. But have they already placed the buys? Well, we know the answer. We want to know if by December, local businesses have already placed their ad buys for the upcoming year. So back in December of 2019, we asked that very question. 32% said they had planned, but they haven't purchased yet. 1 out of 2 said they already placed it, but at least placed some ad buys already. Planned, placed. What about for this year? 1 out of 3 said they've already placed. Again, at least some ad buys. 42% said they have something planned, but not placed. There's certainly a bit of cautious tension in the air, wanting to see how a new administration handles things. What's that going to mean? But they're showing a willingness to advertise, to understand what can happen. And the one thing we hear time and time again is they want help. They want somebody to come in and tell them what to do. I phrased that wrong. They want somebody to come in who understands their business and how to move people through a funnel, and who can provide the solutions to do it. And every one of these things with 3 letters. ROI, or ROI, maybe. Can we start calling it ROI? ROI, they all want ROI. Anyway, they want to see return on their investment. They tell us this time and time again. When you're going in to pitch to these people who are going to spend more in this coming year, 35% more, and they haven't placed all their buys yet, this is what they're going to want to see. And of course, it has everything to do with establishing what that means up front. But heck, I'm telling you stuff you already know, right? Tune in next time for things you don't. Focus.
Okay, so I hope you found that helpful and interesting and maybe a little humorous, but here's the point. They are still undecided. There's still an opportunity to influence these businesses. So I think as you go to market and you're talking to them, know that some of the money that you might see spent, it's still up for grabs. So we asked the question of all of these in our survey, why did you stop buying each respective type of advertising that they said they bought in 2019? So stick with me for a minute. As you look at this graph, this is the sum total of how they answered that for all media combined. So when we asked about newspaper and radio and TV and cable, the top thing on the list when they said, oh, we didn't buy in 2020, but we had bought in 2019, you can see what's at the very top of the list. It's a direct result of COVID-19, right? It's probably no surprise it impacted so many businesses. Many of them just put the brakes on and stopped advertising. But I think it's also interesting to look at what else came up. The fact that they moved money to something else. They stopped advertising on one media and moved those dollars to another. And so I thought, well, let's look at this through the lens of those who bought newspaper in 2019 and then did not buy newspaper advertising in 2020. And you'll see measurement is really important to them. They're trying to understand the ROI, as you heard Corey talk about. But the number one area was also a direct result of COVID-19. But look at the percentage who moved money to something else. 31% of them who stopped advertising said, no, I moved that money to some other type of advertising. So it's not that the advertising dollars went away, it's that they got moved to something else. So we know there's a lot of money on the move. There's always an opportunity to go after that. It means you need to work doubly hard to retain the clients that you have, but it also means those prospects you're calling on could indeed move money in your direction. So looking from, again, the survey perspective of who advertised, or excuse me, what media types or formats they used, and this isn't how much they spend, this is what they used. At the very top of the list, 93% of them said they employed some sort of social media marketing. Next was email marketing, website design and development, SEO, online listings, and then you can see newspaper. So social media, 93%, newspapers, 43%. Right behind that, OTT and online video at 43%. So 43% of them said they used some sort of online video advertising in 2020. And I think you're going to see in a moment why I think that's so important. So remember, I said they're increasing their ad budgets by as much as 14%. Well, unfortunately, they're not applying that equally to all media. And, you know, don't shoot the messenger, but at the bottom of the list, you see print media. It's those are things that they plan to still continue to cut back. Local magazines, as much as 5%, newspapers, 8%, print directories, 16%. You combine that with the fact that some are dropping out an entire media choice, and that could spell a lot of trouble. Fortunately, for the bulk of you on this call, you have other things that you sell. You have a lot of online offerings, and you look at the top 10 things that they're increasing the most. They are all digital forms of advertising. At the very top of that list is streaming video and OTT. You're going to hear me keep talking about that because I think it's a big opportunity for you right now as advertisers are looking to tell their story a bit differently. You see social media, email marketing, SEM, and so forth at the top as well. These are all the things that are going to increase, and the percentage of their budget they're increasing. So 26% increase is pretty big. So here's my recommendation to you. Lead with what they're buying more of, okay? Go after new customers. You think about it, when you're trying to talk to somebody, if you're talking to them about newspapers and they're not all that interested in it, you're just not going to get that far. But understanding that most of them are interested in doing things such as online video, that may be the very best way to get in the door. And from there, you can demonstrate how you can use other mass media products like your newspaper to reach more people and how to make even more of an influence on the customers they're trying to reach. So we also asked them a little bit about effectiveness. How would they rate the effectiveness of different types of marketing? And with respect to those that they made investments in 2020. So we just gave them a scale of 1 to 5 and said, please rate the effectiveness of each of these different types of media. And you can see the average here was about 3.2. Couple things. If you look at this, it's not a real tight V here. You know, there's not a huge disparity from the top to the bottom in terms of effectiveness, but the things at the top, you know, website design, they're finding their investment in website design became more effective and really important to them when it comes to communicating with their customers. It seems obvious, but they're rating that higher and higher these days, particularly as people are not able to come in their doors. Search engine optimization, even CRM, right? Being able to manage all the current customers they have and how they communicate with them is very important. Search engine marketing, streaming video pops up there again pretty high, and email marketing. Again, these are things they're finding to be most effective, so you may want to lead with that as you're going in and talking to your customers. Now, I highly recommend you spend a lot of time looking at the websites of not only your customers and prospects, but their competitors. I was on a call yesterday and we were looking at some RV dealers, and it was just astonishing at the errors and mistakes. And one of the websites, you know, they had their website address. When you clicked on it, it actually went to a pharmaceutical website. So, you know, it was one of those things where you think, gosh, anybody who's calling on that business could certainly get in the door by pointing out where there's some missteps there and how they can show them. I know you know this already, but it's important to understand that right now, with the backdrop of everything that's happened with COVID, it's really pronounced. The things that they're finding a little bit less effective are listed here in red below. So certainly print directories, newspapers, magazines, those things in print aren't getting the higher effectiveness ratings. But looking at what they thought was effective and what became even more effective in 2020 is what you see on this chart here. So the way to look at this, the dark green bars here are sort of what they're no change in effectiveness, you know, from previous year, and the light green is what became more effective. And what I'll have you take a look at is look at streaming video. They said it became 53% of them said it became more effective. So there's something here in terms of how they're telling that story with video that they're finding to get a better result, and it's worth paying attention to. The other things at the top, these 8 methods, they're really all about communicating with and serving their customers virtually. So those are the things that are getting the most attention and will probably continue to get their attention at least for the next several months until things open up more. So my recommendation then is help them look good, help them be seen, help them interact. You know, like I said, take a look at their websites. If they're not doing a good job presenting themselves online, they're not putting their best foot forward. And that's an opportunity for them. Even their CRM is important. That sort of software comes in play because, you know, it's really intertwined with things like their email marketing, their social media, and again, their company website. I would recommend you don't spend a lot of time debating or rationalizing why one thing works better than another. You know, they all work together. Your opportunity is to lead what those things they're most interested in, and from there, build a really strong marketing stack that will help them. So, of course, for everything that got more, that improved in effectiveness, there are things that they saw that decrease in effectiveness. And again, don't shoot the messenger. This is what they're telling us. This information's powerful and important to know. Print media became less effective. And there's 2 real reasons that seem to be surfacing around it. One is the cost, but the other is the lag time. So when you're trying to get messages out to your customers in an urgent manner, You're not necessarily going to wait for the next deadline of a magazine, publishing schedule. You're going to try to get that message out right away with email. You're going to post it on your Facebook page. You're going to use all those things you can do to communicate with people instantly. And that really has put a pinch on print media, but not only print media. Look at out of home. Its effectiveness has really gone down in the eyes of a lot of these advertisers because they recognize there are fewer people out there traveling to work. That's really impacted how they see out of home advertising. Even sites like Yelp, reviews maybe not mattering quite as much as consumers are falling back right now on brands that they already know and trust. What does that mean to you? I think if it were me talking to an advertiser, I'd really try to break this open a bit more and talk to them about what are they doing to remind the current customers they have to come back in more often? What is it they're doing to really solidify their brand in the minds of all those prospects they're trying to get in the door? And then broadcast TV took a pretty big hit. We know with the political ads, it really stymied the ability of a lot of them to cut through that clutter. And we know all the binge watching that's been happening on OTT programs has really become a bit of a cheaper target for a lot of local advertisers. We know radio also got impacted by lower drive time audiences. So, I guess I want to point out to you that the effectiveness of all media takes some hit here. And I think there's an opportunity. My recommendation here is find a weak wildebeest. Those who've heard me speak before, I hammer this home a lot. It's a lot easier to get companies to switch money from one thing to another. I've already demonstrated their willingness to do that. And the fact that they haven't decided, it's a lot easier to get them to do that than come up with new money to spend on the things that you're selling. And I've never met an advertiser who felt like 100% of what they're spending is working 100% effectively. They all feel like something they're doing is weaker than others. And the opportunity is to exploit that. Figure out of all the things they're doing, what is working well? What are they finding that's not working as much? And then use that as the opportunity to springboard into a conversation about the things you can do for them. So let's take a look at social media. Remember I said they're spending a lot more on that. 91% of the respondents said they use Facebook for marketing. That's no surprise to most of us, but the amount of money they're spending on social media continues to grow, 26,000 more than that on social media marketing activities. That's the average. And how are they managing social media? A lot of those expenses are hidden. So if you look at this, 32% of them, or excuse me, 30% of them use some sort of tool or software to help posting or advertising. There's an expense associated with that, about $3,300. But the next one is huge. 76% of them have an employee who manages social media, and the cost of what they pay for those employees and their time to do that adds up, $21,000. How about those who use an agency or third party? It's about 25%, and it's a bit cheaper at $13,000. Those who were buying advertising or sponsored posts within social media, again, increasing every year up to $13,000. And where are they putting that money? Of course, Facebook continues to reign supreme, right? It's the #1 area that they're using in terms of social media, followed by Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so forth. I also want you to look at little TikTok down there, number 8. It's not showed up before on this list, but now it is still very small. Only 6% of them are saying they plan to use TikTok in marketing in the coming year. But there's a cost to all this, that cost of feeding the social beast. Those of us in newspapers certainly understand what it takes to have that content, right? It takes a lot of time and energy and money. For 76% of them, they have staff that is feeding that beast of coming up with the content to put in their social media post. And that cost really adds up. For those who are outsourcing it, the cost is about 1/3 less. I mean, to me, I might use this as a conversation with one of my customers to see, hey, that's something I can help you with. And possibly, if you're like most businesses, we can do it a lot more affordably for you. Keep in mind, a lot of businesses right now are suffering still. They're still cutting back the number of employees they have. And as much as I hate to see anybody lose their job, the very fact is that they might have to eliminate somebody who's doing some of the social media tasks right now. They have a few people on the payroll. It might be something they'd be willing to outsource to you. So what about TikTok? I think it's worth paying attention to. If you look at it, the percentage of SMBs who said they used or planned to use it in 2019, it was only 2%, 2020, 3%, and that doubles to 6% in 2021. But I also pay attention to things like effectiveness. So for those small percent who used it, they found it to be a lot more effective, growing by 54%. So, maybe it's a blip on the screen. I don't know what the longer term prospects are for TikTok. If it reaches a very young audience, 15 to 25-year-olds probably are the ones using it the most. But you got to imagine there are advertisers out there asking themselves, is this something I should be using? Maybe they see their son or daughter or, others using TikTok and they're thinking, is that a viable marketing channel for me? What would it take for them to pick up the phone and call you or one of your sellers to ask them about that? And would your sellers be able to speak intelligently about it? So again, I think it should be on the radar. It's something to pay attention to. And who knows, just like Facebook, which started with a very young audience, changed dramatically now to a much older audience. That could happen with TikTok too, who knows? All right, so my recommendation there is make sure you discuss that hidden cost with the advertiser. Social media, it's still cheap, but boy, they're spending a lot more than they used to. In fact, it's now 8 times what they used to spend, which was about $3,000 a year. And again, since most of those costs are internal, they're hidden. So it's going to be important to have that conversation, talk to them. Who's doing it? How much time do they spend doing it? What's the average amount they're spending for that? Be the experts that they turn to for questions like TikTok and other social media. Whether it's something your business does a whole lot of or not, the idea is this is something that's of high interest to them and you can't ignore it. You can't decide that, hey, I'm going to downplay that. You know what? Instead, let's figure out how to make it work better for you. I've got some ideas how to do that. So let's take a look at streaming video. Again, I think it's a big opportunity. The percent of respondents who bought or plan to buy streaming video continues to grow, 36% in 2019, up to 45% in 2021, plan to buy some sort of streaming video. And how do they rate the effectiveness of this? Look, 53% of them said it became more effective. So again, you got to pay attention. They're moving more money there. They find it more effective. What's your play in terms of streaming video? And 61% of them developed and posted their own content to a video platform like YouTube or Vimeo. 61%. 54% of them, just like social media, they got somebody internal who's managing online video production or advertising. There's a cost associated with that. 43% of them used an agency or third party to manage the production, and 25% of them employed some sort of tool or software to help with their video production and ad placement. So, yes, a lot of it's quick, easy videos done with an iPhone, but some of it is, professional video production. Newspaper advertisers, they're especially fond of video advertising. So when we looked at the newspaper cut of this, those almost 1,000 people who bought newspaper advertising last year, 48% said they're going to buy streaming video in 2021. Okay, these are your customers. These are newspaper customers. Almost half of them said they plan to buy video advertising. And 52% of them said that streaming video was very or extremely effective. So again, put those 2 and 2 together. They plan to buy, they see it really effective. You can't afford not to pay attention to this. And the amount of money they're spending on it is really important to look at too. I showed you some of these percentages. Look at that, 58% of them have staff who manages streaming video. We're talking about newspapers advertisers here. $33,000 they're spending, internally on staff managing that video. Buying ads on OTT and connected TV, not a large percent of them are doing it, only 9%, but of those who are, they're spending quite a bit on it. My recommendation to you though is not think so much about television. It's really about helping them tell their story, right? So it's not a 30-second spot. It might be a little bit longer form video. Patty and I were talking about this earlier. There's a number of folks who would normally be doing wedding videos who are somewhat, available now. Maybe you can employ them as freelancers to help you tell that story on the part of the advertiser, help them with that. Lots of opportunities around video. Remember I said they're getting smarter? Well, one of the things that I've seen is all the responses from these surveys. We actually have an open-ended question where we ask them, what advice would you give to a local media company who's trying to get your business? And we had hundreds of these responses, and I just pulled out a couple that I thought were indicative of many, many responses that we heard. And one of them had to do with performance measurement, right? I told you they're getting smarter, they're getting a lot more sophisticated. So this one in particular, making sure campaigns are aligned with KPIs on a daily basis. Media reps are accustomed to set it and forget it campaigns, but clients with significant digital campaigns are expecting daily work and communication. They've got their own dashboards, right? They're updating. We see a lot of them saying, look, I'm doing A/B testing with my creative, and they are looking for reps who are taking charge of that, who are proactive and looking at that constantly every day to help them improve it. So they're getting smarter, and they're getting frustrated. We saw a lot of responses from folks saying, look, I know more about this stuff than the people walking in my doors. So for those of you in leadership positions and in training, it is so important that you make sure your sellers are trained. It's not enough to just understand, broadly what these things are. They need to understand how they work. They need to understand how they execute, and they need to be experts, because they're otherwise going to look foolish in front of advertisers who in many cases know more about it than those people are out there selling. So I thought we'd take a little bit of time next to talk about franchises. I think it's a really important segment. We just published a paper yesterday, so you guys are going to have a glimpse at some of the insights that we gleaned from that. There are about 775,000 franchises in the USA. This according to Fran Data and the International Franchise Association. And we know that most of them, or almost half of them, fall into that restaurant category, whether they're QSRs or full service restaurants, or somewhere in the retail food or product or service delivery area. But there's also a number in lodging. Real estate's a big one for franchise. Commercial and residential services, 14% are in some sort of business service, and 16% in personal services. But here's the thing, 98% of those franchises are locally owned, and 53% of them are owned by franchisees who manage multiple locations in a single market. And so your independent businesses that you work with are competing against these folks, and many of them are local business owners that you can influence as well. Now, not all their budget is discretionary. Some of that's dictated corporately, but there are opportunities. And in 2020, we saw that 20,000 franchises closed permanently. That's really tough. But also, if you look at what happens in a downturn, it's usually an opportunity for franchise creation. And so in 2021, the forecast is for 28,000 new franchises to be established. That's more than twice the annual average. So I think, if you're looking for new business opportunities, keep your eyes out for those new franchises that are going to be opening, and also understand what the impact of that is to the independent businesses that you work with. So let's take a look at the profile of these businesses that were in our survey. Now, there's 160 businesses who took the survey who fall into that franchise category, and 58% of those fall into the categories of retail business, real estate agencies, restaurants, and services. And in fact, our survey skewed a bit heavier in the real estate area than it did in say the food business or restaurant category. But just to give you some perspective on the percentage of respondents. Now, 160 may not seem like a big number, and it's not, but what we find when we do these surveys is once you hit a few hundred responses, you can get more and more and more, and the responses don't change that much. It doesn't really materially impact the numbers. So I would pay attention to the following information when it comes to franchises and what that means to you as you go to market. The majority of franchises that we surveyed have pretty unskilled marketers that are running small businesses. And while they are a little more skilled at marketing than your average business, 75% of them would fall under what we would call not a master marketer. They're novices or maybe an apprentice level. Marketing is not the primary task that they have. They might be more experts at window replacement and running a construction firm, not so much marketing. So I think that presents an opportunity. They tend to be a bit bigger. The majority are small businesses, but they're more likely, they're actually twice as likely to be larger businesses. 53% of them have multiple locations. So again, another bigger opportunity for you. And when you look at the ages of the businesses, 70% have been in business 6 years or more. Well, if you compare that with independent businesses, they're twice as likely to have started their franchise just within the last 5 years. So they tend to be newer, less established businesses, and again, good opportunities to influence them. So let's think about their ad budgets. They're actually 20% larger than the ad budgets of their counterpart independent businesses. The most favorite types of advertising for them are social media, email, and SEO, and they're most likely spending more on those because they're larger businesses. The average number of media types is actually one more. They use about 8 media types versus independents who only use 7. And then the top forms of marketing are social media, email marketing, and SEO. And heading into 2020, those are the things that they're using the most. So as you're going after those franchise businesses, know how important social media and email marketing and SEO is to them. You see, a lot of the brand advertising, of course, falls to the corporate entity, but it's the being found piece of it that the local businesses are spending money on. And in fact, the combined annual expenditure on SEO and SEM by these franchise businesses is $57,000. So they're planning to increase that search marketing be found piece, really important to those franchise businesses. You can see as you look at this, of course, the things at the top of the list, social media, email marketing, also really important to them. And when we looked at how they rank the effectiveness, the SEM, SEO are at the very top of their list. Not surprising. Oftentimes the website piece of it is again handled corporately, but they're doing things to make sure they get found. So particularly the search engine marketing. A lot of franchises are competing with, even other franchise owners, maybe even within the same franchise group where they might overlap a little bit in terms of where the marketing message might reach. So being really targeted with them and their own geography is very, very important. Now, indulge me for a moment. This is a little bit of a complicated slide, and we're nearing the end here. So if you're still awake, pay attention to this one. I'm going to walk you through it here. First, you see different size bubbles. The size of the bubble indicates the average annual amount spent on each of these respective marketing areas. So you can see the biggest one in blue is broadcast TV. The color, if they're blue, it means they're offline or traditional media types. If they're pink, it means they're digital or online media types. Now, you'll see a center line here. Everything below this center line means they're become less effective. Anything above, they're becoming more effective in the eyes of the advertisers. So these are local franchise owners and how they see the effectiveness changing. And SEO and SEM are really gaining. They're becoming the most effective. Those are the things that are spending tremendous amounts of money on. So again, when it comes to leading with what they're buying most, you need to keep this in mind. If you're trying to get in the mindset of these businesses, that's what they're thinking about. How can you help me be found? That's, first and foremost in their mind. Brand advertising, interesting, yeah, but they bought into a franchise because probably the name was already well known and established. But being found is still another thing they gotta work on. So looking at that and looking for franchise owners where they're increasing and where they're decreasing, the way to look at this chart is the orange lines indicate the percentage increase or decrease in budget in 2021 over 2020. And the blue is actually the amount of money that they spent in 2020 advertising. So you can see way on the left is OTT and online video, just about 25,000 on average that these local franchise companies are spending, but they plan to increase that by 25%. Now below the center line, you can see magazines, print directory, newspapers, they're planning on decreasing those types of advertising. So what does that mean to you? Again, I'd study this. I'd think about this when I'm going after different types of franchise customers, and then also use this information to frame it with the conversation for the independents that they're competing against. You know, looking at the difference between those independents versus the franchise, franchises are more likely than independent businesses to use broadcast and cable TV advertising and direct mail. They're less likely to be using outdoor magazines and, again, web design, because a lot of that's being handled by the corporate entities. So, you know, we know this pandemic forced a reduction in the usage of a lot of different media types. There are 9 of them that are going to continue seeing less usage by these franchise owners. This is the 9 grouped here on the left. You see they're all declining, right? The amount of money they plan to spend, the percentage of them plan to use it going down. And then you've got some that are actually increasing. What are they? Search engine marketing and online video and OTT. I know it sounds like a broken record there, but you've got to pay attention to those things because, you know, again, that's what they're interested in the most. So when we ask them, why did they stop, franchise owners stop buying each of these respective media types, what came to the top of the list? Well, for local magazines, it's too expensive and it's difficult to measure. For newspapers, too expensive, and it was a result of COVID-19. For out of home, COVID-19, and they moved the money to something else. So I'd pay attention to things that they've moved money to something else, because that could be an opportunity, money that's up for grabs. You know, they're not getting what they used to expect out of that, perhaps. They're finding something more effective. Talk to them about what they've been doing there. So let's look a little bit deeper at search engine marketing. Franchises are more likely to buy SEM. They're more likely than independent businesses to use a third-party agency to do that. So 61% of franchises plan to buy SEM in 2021. They're a lot more likely than the independent businesses to be buying it. So, you know, if you've got a Google AdWords program and that's something you've got an expertise in, lead with that. If you look at how SEM's handled, nearly 7 out of 10 franchises are using an agency or third party to handle SEM. So they're not all going it on their own. Fewer than 1 in 3 have someone on staff that's managing it. So it's a bit different than the independents. And then how much are they spending on SEM? The annual advertising expenditures on SEM, $36,000 for a franchise. That's 47% more than what your average independent business is. So again, keep that in mind as you're selling. Let's look at the SEO piece of it. Not a lot of difference when it comes to the use of SEO when it comes to franchises versus independents, but how SEO is handled a bit different. Again, 7 in 10 are using an agency for SEO, and the amount of money is quite a bit more. It's 24% more than independent businesses spend. And again, talking about video, the popularity of that, you know, is not going away. It grew really fast in 2020. Half the franchises are using some sort of online video, developing post and video themselves. So again, that's something you might be able to help with, knowing that nearly half of all of them plan to use streaming video. 44% of those who use it in the previous year are finding it to be more effective. So moving more money there, finding it more effective, pay a lot of attention to that. You can see the percentages of how many of them are spending on software or having somebody internal manage that for them, 31%. 27% are buying ads on YouTube, and only 14% are buying ads on OTT or connected TV. 48%, so a bit fewer, are developing and posting their own videos. I think there's an opportunity here. Again, I think it's something you should be paying attention to as you're talking to those franchise businesses. So let me just summarize this, because we're running out of time here, and I do want to leave some for Q&A at the end. They're getting a lot more sophisticated. They're looking for marketing expertise, and so be sure to be able to help them with that. Some of the data you're getting out of this presentation, use it in those sales conversations. They're still on the fence. There's an opportunity for them to be influenced. So I gotta tell you, if I were a sales manager and I wanted to talk to my salespeople and get them really pumped up, I'd be pointing that out. You know, the decisions are not all made. At the same time, that means we gotta make sure that we're locking in the budgets for those customers we do work with. They're increasing their spending on average 14%. They have a need right now to interact with customers in a way that's a bit different since they're not coming in the door. So your job is to help them be found, help them look good, help them tell their story, use video to do that. Understand they're spending more on social media and there's a high internal cost associated with that. Uncover that. And we are facing more franchise competition in the coming year. I think that presents an opportunity for you to go after those franchise businesses, but also understand that that's who those businesses are competing with, and they need your help to compete. So that's really all I have. Wanted to leave some time for questions at the end. So if you've got those questions, you can certainly type them in. Patty, any that you've got that you want to read off to me?
Sure. Unfortunately, this one popped in. It popped in late for some reason, according to the time it came in. So we're going to have to kind of go back. But the question was early in the presentation when you were talking about media sources being less effective. And the question was, were there any qualifying questions as to why they concluded these media sources were less effective? And this was again early in your presentation, like at 10.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I remember precisely which slide that was. What I'll tell you is the brief answer is not really. The way we were getting that information, this was the slide that you guys are referring to. Most of that came from open-ended responses. So if they answered certain questions certain ways, they had an opportunity to then, give us more detail behind it. And so some of this is what we're reading from those open-ended responses and then projecting it down to the media that they said they cut back.
Okay. I have another question. Before I get to that though, folks, I just want to remind you, yes, go ahead and type any questions that you have. You have somebody on the line here who has lots of information and is talking to and listening to lots of people. So take this opportunity to leverage Jim Brown's expertise and that of Borrell. So type any questions in that you have. The current question that just popped in is, does your data change by region of the US or possibly rural, different than metro?
Yeah, great question. With respect to the survey, we do get a pretty wide variety of businesses across the entire country. Northeast is a bit more concentrated, as you might expect. As we've analyzed it, we really haven't had a whole lot of difference. Where we see more variation is the size of businesses, more so than location. Now, that's when it comes to this survey. So I will say this about surveys, right? They're general, they're directional, and they're certainly worth paying attention to. The more people who fill out the survey, the more opportunities we can cut those surveys, right? So if we don't have enough respondents in, say, rural markets to pull those out separately in a way that's statistically reliable, we really can't speak to it. But what I'll tell you sort of anecdotally is, yes, there are variations. In fact, our primary product, which is called Compass, where we track ad spending, we definitely see differences in different markets because the media mix is different, right? We know in some markets there are more radio stations than others. Some markets don't even have TV stations. Some markets skew heavier in newspaper. So there is a bit of variability there. But in terms of using the data I showed you today, not so much. I think it's still useful to have those conversations. So Patty, I'm gonna just indulge me one more minute on that subject. To be effective with this, it's really not telling them anything, it's showing them and eliciting their response, right? What do you think of that? Look, it looks like 18% of broadcast TV advertisers said it became less effective last year. Mr. or Mrs. Advertiser, what has been your perception there, right? They might agree, they might disagree, doesn't matter. That's helpful information. So that's the way you really want to be using this in a sales conversation. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a couple more coming in. So the question is kind of an opinion question, but probably worth talking about. And I think you have talked a lot about this, but do SMBs realize all newspapers can do for them?
You know, I think they don't. I really don't. And I think one of the reasons why is so many of our sellers still go out there leading, unfortunately, with newspaper. Even picking up the phone and calling somebody, you know, they might be predisposed to not even wanting to talk to you because they associate you with the newspaper, which may not be of high interest to them. So yeah, it is my opinion, and it's born from conversations I've had with many of you out there. And so my recommendation is make sure your sales approach is a little bit different. In fact, I heard something not long ago, and this was actually from a broadcast company, and I thought how liberating it was. Now, if you think about it, what was it? Almost 50% of them bought bought newspaper advertising. Far fewer buy TV advertising. So far fewer businesses are interested even talking to a broadcast TV rep, right? But some of them are approaching it and saying, look, Mr. Advertiser, frankly, more of my customers don't buy broadcast TV than do. Our company does a whole lot of things beyond that. I think that same approach could be used by newspaper sellers and probably should be.
Well, I just to throw in a little more, if you were on this call, on this academy yesterday and sat through, the presentations we heard, there are so many cool things that newspapers are doing. I mean, just all kinds of great ideas. And so, maybe we need to invoke a little bit of PR here, right? to let people know. And also, Jim, there was a lot of conversation yesterday about video, about do-it-yourself videos on YouTube and how people are really, businesses are loving that kind of thing and doing that thing. So, I think this is just the case of, and again, we heard this yesterday, being the expert here, right? Talking about, and all this information that you've given today is certainly useful in that regard. Another question that came in, are you seeing any data for Clubhouse, or is that still too new?
It's still pretty new. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Clubhouse it's probably, the next big growing thing, growing rapidly, but still very small. And it really is all around online audio. So think about social media right now, how much of that is done in text and through photos. Clubhouse is a little bit different sort of take on that, and that it's sort of these think of it as chat rooms, but in audio form. So what I would say is it's worth paying attention to. And just like a lot of these things, some of them are going to take off and some of them won't. But I think you want advertisers to turn to you to ask you those questions. So I think it's worth understanding how they work. I mentioned TikTok. Do your sellers know how TikTok works? Do they know how that self-serve platform works? Have you ever set up an account and looked? Again, those are things worth doing just so you can have that expertise. So I think the verdict's out, again, small but growing.
Yeah, I did make a note, Jim, here in my notes. It says find 5-year-old to do TikTok webinar. Watch for that coming from America's newspapers. Bob Smith's 5-year-old kindergartner is going to do a webinar on TikTok.
There you go.
So I don't have any more questions teed up right now, but just in closing, first off, I'd like to say thank you very much, Jim, for tremendous amount of information. A lot to take in, but to your point, we need to know this stuff. Folks, when I talked to Jim this morning, we talked about information that is sometimes hard to hear, but very good to know. And I think that's what a lot of this is about. It's important that we know it. And it's not what you hear or what you know, it's what you do about it. So thank you, Jim, for helping us in that regard. Folks, we are going to take a 15-minute break here, and we will be back with Liz Kreider-Huff and Julie Foley from 2nd Street. You know, strap in because these guys go about a mile a minute with lots of really great ideas. So we will be back up at 11:15, that's Central Time, for another hour session with 2nd Street, and then we will have a longer break after that.